Imagine losing your absolute best senior developer.
Yeah, the one person who actually understands your legacy code base.
Exactly. Not to a
Mhm.
deep-pocketed competitor offering, a massive equity package,
Yeah.
and not to a toxic manager either. Or even burnout from shipping a really massive high-stakes product feature.
Right, the usual suspects.
Yeah. Instead, imagine losing them to a compliance audit.
It sounds wild, but it's happening.
It really is. According to real operators who are just venting in the trenches of a cybersecurity forum we're looking at today,
Hmm.
this isn't some hypothetical fear.
No, it's a daily reality.
Right. This is happening right now across the entire technology sector. So we are diving into a huge stack of sources today.
And it's a pretty diverse stack, too.
Totally. We've got those painfully honest operator accounts, plus some forward-looking 2026 auditor guides from Desalta and Kellyan Digital and Cyber.
Which are super insightful, by the way.
They really are. And we even have some striking editorial notes that apply classic industrial design philosophy to software architecture.
Which is a brilliant way to look at it.
It is. So, our mission for you today is simple, but, well, it's massive. We want to extract actionable ways for engineering and security teams to kill audit fatigue permanently.
Yes, kill it dead.
Exactly. We're looking at how to transition compliance from a chaotic, reactive paperwork burden into a sleek, quiet systems design problem.
Which is such a massive paradigm shift.
It really is. Okay, let's unpack this. Why does something fundamentally meant to prove trust to your customers usually end up destroying the internal productivity and morale of your own team?
I mean, the root of that destruction really lies in the friction between how engineers build systems and how auditors traditionally verify them.
Right, it's like they speak two completely different languages.
Exactly. And before we can re-architect a solution, we have to look honestly at how broken the current reality is for most organizations.
Yeah, we have to examine the pathology of it.
Precisely. When you read the accounts from those Reddit threads and cybersecurity forums, the language they use is just incredibly revealing.
It's pretty dark, honestly.
It is. They don't talk about SOC2 compliance as a technical challenge. They literally refer to it as a productivity pillar.
Or a pure box-checking exercise.
Right. There was one security leader who detailed a situation where their organization forced this top-down, completely ham-fisted compliance protocol onto the engineering team.
And it backfired spectacularly.
Completely. It resulted in the resignation of critical developers. And the thing is, the developers didn't leave because they opposed security.
Right, nobody wants to build an insecure product.
Exactly. They left because the implementation of compliance turned them from builders into bureaucrats.
Wow. That is a staggering hidden cost. I mean, if you ask a CFO what a SOC2 audit costs, they'll just pull up the invoice from the CPA firm.
Sure, yeah. $40,000, $80,000.
Right, whatever the market rate is.
Yeah.
But that invoice is just a tiny fraction of the actual expense.
Oh, absolutely.
The true cost is the hidden engineering tax.
Mhm.
It's that silent internal drag of taking highly paid, highly skilled engineers.
People whose sole function is to innovate.
Exactly. People who are hired to solve complex logical problems and forcing them to act as part-time archivists.
Archivist is the perfect term for it, because the defining characteristic of this broken process is what operators call the archaeological dig.
Ugh, the dig. It sounds exhausting.
It really is. Let's walk through how this typically manifests in a real company. Say an organization signs a major enterprise client.
Huge win for the sales team.
Huge win. But the contract is contingent on a SOC2 report, so management panics.
Cue the fire drill.
Right. They scramble to write a dozen policy documents overnight, assign these arbitrary owners who don't actually know what they own.
Just putting names in a spreadsheet.
Exactly. And they scrape together just enough screenshots to satisfy the auditor. They get the report and then collectively exhale.
The crisis is over.
Yeah, everyone goes back to their actual jobs. But then, 9 months later, the annual renewal cycle begins.
And that's when the panic sets back in. Because reading through these accounts, I realized almost every frustrated engineer hits on the exact same paradox when that 9-month mark arrives.
Yeah, the 80-20 rule.
Exactly. The technical reality of their system is perfectly sound, but the administrative reality is just a total void. They call it the 80-20 documentation rule.
What's fascinating here is the psychological disconnect that rule creates.
Tell me about it.
So the 80-20 rule dictates that in a modern, reasonably mature engineering environment, 80% of the technical controls are actually already implemented.
Right. Like the cloud environment is natively secure.
Yes. Multi-factor authentication is enforced via their identity provider. Data is encrypted at rest. Code isn't merged without a pull request.
So they are actually doing the right thing.
They are. The underlying physics of the organization are relatively safe. However, they only possess 20% of the documentation required by the auditor to prove those mechanisms exist.
And more importantly, to prove they operated continuously.
Exactly.
So that's when the archaeological dig begins.
Unearthing the past.
Yeah. You have a developer who pushed a totally minor bug fix to production, say, 6 months ago.
Long forgotten.
Right. And suddenly, a compliance manager is tapping them on the shoulder, asking them to dig through Jira to find the original ticket.
Which is probably closed and buried.
Yeah. And then search their Slack history for the specific thread where another developer said, looks good.
And then take a screenshot of that exact conversation.
Right. Cross-reference it with the deployment log in AWS, and paste all of it into a Google Doc just to prove that peer review happened.
Agonizing.
It sounds like trying to prove to an auditor that you brushed your teeth every day last year by frantically hunting down old toothpaste receipts and asking your roommate to sign an affidavit.
That is hilarious, but it's so accurate.
Like, I swear I saw them use the sink. It has absolutely nothing to do with actual dental hygiene at that point.
No, it doesn't.
It's pure theater.
And the theater aspect is exactly what drives these engineers to quit. I mean, the friction isn't coming from the security requirement itself.
Right. Devs generally want things to be secure.
Exactly. The friction comes from a fundamental architectural flaw. The organization essentially bolted compliance on top of the business.
Oh, instead of building it into the business.
Precisely. The controls exist merely at the policy level, like a PDF sitting on a shared drive somewhere.
Gathering digital dust.
Right. They completely lack any instrumentation. They aren't wired into the actual operational machinery.
So they're totally blind.
Yeah. So when the auditor asks for evidence of an event, the system literally cannot report its own state. It requires a human being to bridge the gap between reality and the auditor's spreadsheet.
Which is just a massive waste of human intellect. And if the problem is chaos, fragmented evidence, and relying on really fragile human memory, the instinct of many organizations is just to tell their teams to work harder.
Oh, yeah. Just be more disciplined.
Right. Fill out the forms faster, do your job. But reading the editorial design notes in our source stack, a completely different framework emerges.
A much better one.
Yeah. To fix an engineering problem, we shouldn't look at accounting standards. We should look at industrial design, specifically the philosophy of Dieter Rams.
Applying Dieter Rams to cybersecurity compliance seems totally counterintuitive at first glance.
It really does. Like, what does a radio designer know about SOC2?
Right. But his principles actually strike at the very heart of the system's design failure we were just discussing.
Okay, unpack that for us.
Well, Rams was the industrial designer behind the iconic look of those mid-century Braun products, and he operated on the principle of less but better.
Less but better. I love that.
He believed that good design makes a product useful, it is unobtrusive, and it is thorough down to the last detail.
Unobtrusive is the key word there for compliance.
Exactly. But most importantly, good design clarifies the structure of the system.
And the source notes translate this beautifully into the context of audit fatigue. They paint this really vivid visual metaphor.
The tangled knot.
Yes. Imagine the current state of compliance as a tangled, noisy knot. You have disconnected approval slips, manual calendar reminders that just get ignored.
Snoozed for the 5th time.
Right. Scattered UI fragments from a dozen different sauce tools and frantic Slack messages.
Absolute chaos.
Total chaos. Dieter Rams' philosophy demands we take that tangled knot and redesign it into a single, clean event stream. Connected nodes. Recurring automated loops.
The paradigm shift here is profound, honestly. The sources are arguing that SOC2 is fundamentally not a documentation problem.
It's an engineering problem.
Exactly. It is an automation and observability challenge. If you design your operational systems correctly, audit readiness shouldn't be a separate project or a season of panic.
It shouldn't be an event at all.
Right. It should be a quiet byproduct, a side effect of simply running your business. The evidence is generated merely by the act of doing the work.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, though. But wait, shouldn't buying a fancy GRC software tool just fix this automatically?
Ah, the GRC silver bullet.
Right. Like governance, risk, and compliance software. If I'm a CTO or a founder listening to this, I'm thinking, great. Automation? Observability? I don't want my engineers doing manual labor either.
So I'll just throw money at it.
Exactly. There is an entire industry of heavily funded SaaS startups out there promising to automate SOC2 in a matter of days.
SO2 in a box.
Yeah, you install the software, you connect the APIs, and you just let the dashboard do the work. Problem solved.
Yeah, that is the trap. The operators in our sources explicitly warn against this illusion of software as a silver bullet.
Why does it fail?
Because buying software does not fix bad organizational design.
Right.
The reason those platforms often fail to eliminate audit fatigue is that they are being asked to automate broken human processes.
So it's garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly. If you look under the hood of a typical GRC tool, the API-driven checks are actually the easy part.
Like checking a server setting.
Yeah. The software can easily ping your cloud provider and verify that an S3 bucket is encrypted. That's trivial.
Right, that takes 2 seconds.
But the massive bulk of a SOC2 audit involves human-in-the-loop processes.
Okay, let's play that out for a second. Say an employee leaves the company.
A classic scenario.
Right. If your off-boarding process is an undocumented nightmare where HR emails the manager DMs the IT guy on Slack.
And the IT guy manually deletes the Okta account, but totally forgets the standalone AWS access.
Exactly. And nobody tells the third-party payroll provider what happens when you plug a shiny GRC tool into that mess.
Well, the GRC tool will simply alert you with great speed and efficiency that you have failed your offboarding control.
So it just yells at you faster.
Yes. It cannot reach into the physical world and force HR and IT to actually communicate. Automating a broken human process just gets you a faster broken process.
That is such a crucial point.
You cannot fix a system's design issue by layering a pretty dashboard over it. The architecture of the human workflow has to be resolved first.
So you have to do the unglamorous work first.
You do. You have to establish the single source of truth, map the actual flow of data, and define the specific triggers.
And then?
Once the underlying system behaves predictably, then and only then can you instrument it with software to automatically capture the evidence.
Wow. Okay, so we've spent a lot of time on the internal motivation for fixing this. Saving the sanity of your engineering team, preventing your top talent from walking out the door.
Which is reason enough, frankly.
Totally. But as we look at the 2026 auditor guides from DeSalta and Callion, there is a massive external pressure forcing this evolution too.
Oh, the market is shifting radically.
Yes. The people actually buying your software are no longer accepting the theater of the archaeological dig.
The evolution in buyer sophistication really is the catalyst here.
Because they've been burned before.
Exactly. Enterprise procurement teams and their CISOs have been burned way too many times by vendors who looked great on paper but suffered massive breaches due to just blatant operational negligence.
Right. Like the PDF policy looked great, but nobody was actually following it.
Precisely. And to understand how these buyers are mitigating that risk now, we have to look at the mechanics of the audit reports themselves.
Specifically, the difference between a Type 1 and a Type 2 report.
Exactly.
So let's break that down for the listener. A Type 1 report is essentially a snapshot, isn't it?
That is definitely the most accurate way to conceptualize it. A Type 1 report evaluates the design of your security controls at a single specific point in time.
Like taking a photograph.
Right. It proves that on, say, a random Tuesday in October, your organization possessed the correct policies, the correct configurations, and the proper intent.
The intent being key there.
Yes. For an early-stage startup trying to just unblock its first major enterprise deal, a Type 1 is often the necessary entry ticket. It proves you at least understand the baseline requirements.
Right. But the problem with a snapshot is that I can clean my house immaculately for the 1 hour the appraiser comes over.
Shove everything in the closet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that snapshot provides absolutely zero evidence that I don't live in absolute squalor the other 364 days of the year.
And that is exactly the limitation enterprise buyers have realized. They understand that a beautifully designed policy document in October doesn't prevent a developer from bypassing code reviews during a frantic product launch in November.
Because humans are human.
Right. And that realization is what drives the demand for the SOC2 Type 2 report.
The gold standard.
Yes. A Type 2 evaluates not just the design of the controls, but their operating effectiveness over a continuous period of time.
How long is that period usually?
Typically, the observation window is 3 to 12 months. So if the type 1 is a photograph, the type 2 is a documentary film.
Oh, I like that analogy.
It forces the auditor to sample events randomly across that entire time frame to ensure the rules are consistently applied.
And the Kellyan Guide notes that as we move into 2026, enterprise buyers consider this continuous performance evidence the absolute baseline.
It's table stakes now.
Exactly. The mindset of the procurement team has shifted entirely from asking, did this vendor pass an audit last year, to asking, are this vendor's controls operating effectively today?
And the stakes attached to these reports are just immense.
Huge. In fact, in the Reddit thread, there was this really interesting debate about the stakes. One user claimed, you can't really fail a SOC2 audit unless you intentionally lie to the auditor.
Right. They said you just get a quote-unquote shitty report.
But another operator aggressively corrected them about what a bad report actually means in the real world.
And they were right to correct them. The mechanism of the report's conclusion is vital to understand here.
Break it down for us.
An auditor doesn't issue a pass or fail grade like in high school. They issue an opinion.
Right.
And the gold standard, the outcome every single organization requires, is an unqualified opinion.
Which is such a uniquely terrible piece of accounting jargon.
Oh, it's the worst.
I mean, in literally any other context, calling someone unqualified is an insult.
You wouldn't want an unqualified doctor.
Exactly. But in the audit world, it means the auditor is issuing their approval without any qualifications, caveats, or reservations.
It is a completely clean bill of health.
Right. The terminology is inverted, but the impact is totally definitive. Now consider the alternatives.
Right. What happens when things go wrong?
Yeah. If the auditor discovers significant gaps in your operations, say you fail to offboard several employees within your stated SLA, or a subset of critical infrastructure changes totally bypassed peer review, what happens?
The auditor will issue a qualified opinion.
Which means?
It means they believe the system is generally sound, except for these specific material failures.
The except for is the killer.
Oh, absolutely. And if the system is entirely chaotic, they may even issue an adverse opinion or disclaimer of opinion.
And the sources are very clear on how the market reacts to those alternative opinions.
They do not react well.
No. One enterprise buyer stated flatly that if they open a vendor's SOC2 report and see a qualified opinion, the evaluation ends immediately.
Just dead on arrival.
Yeah. The report goes in the trash, and the deal is dead. A qualified opinion signals to the buyer that your continuous operations just cannot be trusted.
Right. You might have the fancy policies, but you lack the operational discipline to actually execute them.
Okay, I've always found the Type 1 versus Type 2 distinction a bit rigid, though. I want to challenge this.
Sure, go for it.
If enterprise buyers want continuous proof, and failing to provide it kills million-dollar deals, doesn't moving to a Type 2 just mean a continuous nightmare for the engineering team?
How so?
Well, if the annual audit was an archaeological dig, doesn't continuous compliance mean they're just out in the dirt digging every single day?
That is a great question. And if the organization maintains a manual approach, then yes, transitioning to continuous compliance will absolutely destroy the team.
They would just quit immediately.
They would. However, the mechanism of continuous observability operates on a completely different physical reality.
Okay, explain that.
When compliance is designed as a continuous system, the evidence is collected silently in the background. The systems themselves generate the cryptographic proof of the event at the exact moment the event occurs.
So there's no human involvement.
Exactly. Because the system is continuously capturing reality, the need for the human archaeological dig just completely evaporates. The panic of the audit only exists when evidence wasn't captured contemporaneously.
I get it. So it's the difference between doing your taxes by keeping a literal shoebox full of faded, crumpled receipts.
Which is a nightmare.
Right. A nightmare that you have to manually sort and categorize during an entire weekend in April.
Yes.
Versus using modern financial software that automatically categorizes every single swipe of your corporate card the exact second the transaction clears.
Perfect analogy.
When tax day arrives, there's no weekend of panic. The state of your finances is already known. You just hit export.
The elimination of the shoebox is the ultimate goal here. But to architect these continuous automated systems, an engineering team has to understand the underlying framework that auditors are actually using to measure them.
They need to know the rules of the game.
Exactly. They need to demystify the criteria because unlike highly prescriptive frameworks, SOC2 operates on a uniquely flexible foundation.
All right, let's talk about the Trust Services Criteria, or the TSC. Our Desalta guide points out that if you look at a framework like ISO 27001, it is highly formal, very rigid. Yeah, it gives you a rigid list of requirements. But SOC2, driven by the TSC, tells you what outcome you need to achieve, but it deliberately refuses to tell you how to achieve it.
And the architecture of the TSC is intentionally agnostic like that.
Why is that?
Well, a SOC2 framework has to remain functionally relevant, whether it is being applied to a legacy bank running physical mainframes in a literal basement or a hypergrowth SaaS startup running entirely on ephemeral serverless architecture in AWS.
Right, those are two totally different worlds.
Exactly. To achieve that elasticity, the standard defines 5 high-level trust services criteria: security, availability, processing integrity, confidentiality, and privacy.
Now, a crucial tactical point from the sources for anyone listening. Yeah. A startup doesn't need to tackle all 5 criteria simultaneously.
Please do not try to do that.
Yeah. Expanding the scope of your audit too early is a massive unforced error. It drastically increases the operational burden and the cost of the audit without providing proportional value to the buyer.
It's just burning money and time.
So what is the ideal scope? The sources say the golden trio that satisfies almost every enterprise procurement requirement is security, which, by the way, is foundational and mandatory for every single report.
You can't skip security.
Right. Security paired with availability and confidentiality.
And once that scope is defined, the real engineering challenge is translation.
Translation.
Yeah. You must take an abstract principle from the TSC and engineer a concrete, observable control.
Let's examine the mechanics of that translation.
Okay, sure. Let's take the principle of security. It dictates that logical access to systems must be restricted to authorized users.
Pretty broad.
Very broad. So the real-world implementation, the actual controls you design, might include enforcing multi-factor authentication via Okta, implementing role-based access control in your AWS environment, and executing automated quarterly access reviews.
That makes sense. Or consider the principle of system monitoring. The TSC just says you must detect anomalies.
Again, super vague.
Right. So the engineered control for a modern team is routing all system logs to a centralized SIEM tool, configuring specific alerting thresholds for brute force login attempts, and maintaining an on-call incident response rotation.
Exactly.
And for change management, the principle is just that system updates are authorized and traceable.
So what does the control look like?
The control is configuring your GitHub repository to mathematically require at least one approving review from a code owner before a pull request can be merged into the main branch.
The mechanism of defining these controls rests entirely on the organization. The framework provides the destination, management dictates the route.
So what does this all mean? Management just makes up their own controls.
Yeah.
That sounds a bit like grading your own homework. I can hear engineers groaning at this right now.
It does sound like that, yeah.
Oh.
And the SLO analogy is perfectly accurate here.
Right, setting your own service level objectives.
Exactly. The auditor doesn't dictate that your application's uptime must be 99.999%. The auditor just checks if you are actively monitoring and meeting the specific SLO you define for your unique business context.
But if a company writes incredibly weak controls, won't the auditor just rubber stamp it?
The risk of a rubber stamp is real if you engage a low-quality auditor. But a reputable CPA firm will absolutely reject a control that is fundamentally incapable of mitigating the associated risk.
So you can't just cheat the system.
No. If your defined control for change management is literally the lead developer visually glances at the code before deploying, the auditor will reject the design of that control outright.
Because it's not traceable or robust.
Right. But the flexibility of the TSC is the exact superpower that allows you to eliminate audit fatigue.
Because you get to choose your own adventure.
Precisely. Because you define the control, you have the power to map the compliance requirement directly to the specific tools and workflows your engineers are already using.
That is the crucial pivot.
Yeah.
You don't invent a bureaucratic parallel process just for the sake of the auditor.
Never.
Because if you force an engineer to fill out a separate Jira ticket justifying a code change, and then fill out a Google form confirming they reviewed it, and then log into a totally separate compliance portal to upload a screenshot,
they will resent it. They will bypass it. And your audit will fail. Instead, you instrument reality.
Instrument reality. I love that phrasing.
Thanks. You align the written control with the actual physical state of your engineering pipeline. If the reality of your workflow is that developers push code, a CI/CD pipeline runs automated tests, and a peer approves it in GitLab, your defined control should reflect exactly that sequence.
And nothing more, nothing less.
Right. By mapping the control to the existing mature system, the generation of evidence becomes an invisible byproduct of simply doing the work.
Okay, so we have the philosophical foundation of DRAMs. We understand the market pressure driving the need for continuous Type 2 observability, and we know that the trust services criteria allow us to map controls to our actual engineering reality.
Right, the theory is solid.
But philosophy doesn't survive contact with a chaotic Monday morning. How do we practically execute this transition? How do we stop the bleeding in the engineering department today?
We have to get tactical.
Yes. The operator sources emphasize two immediate tactical shifts to cure audit fatigue: centralizing control management and embedding compliance into daily workflows.
Let's start with centralizing control management. This addresses the most persistent point of failure in any compliance program: the diffusion of responsibility.
When everyone owns it, nobody owns it.
Exactly. When an auditor discovers a failed control, say, an administrative account that wasn't deactivated after an employee was terminated, the failure is rarely malicious.
It's just an oversight.
Right. It is almost always a failure of ownership.
Yeah.
The sources heavily advocate for the rigorous application of a RICI matrix.
RACI meaning responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed.
Yes.
Now, people roll their eyes at RACI matrices because they feel deeply, deeply corporate.
They do sound very middle management.
They do. But the sources frame this beautifully. Doing the RCI work isn't glamorous, but organizational ambiguity is wildly expensive.
It's expensive.
Think about the mechanics of offboarding. If the IT department assumes HR is triggering the deprovisioning sequence, and HR assumes the direct manager is handling it.
And the direct manager assumes security is monitoring it.
Right. Nobody is doing it. And the ex-employee retains active credentials to your production database for 6 months.
And that single ambiguity results in a qualified opinion, which kills the enterprise deal.
Boom. Millions of dollars lost.
Exactly. To eliminate the ambiguity, you must define the operational mechanics of every single control. You identify the specific individual responsible for operating the control.
Just one person.
One person. You identify the individual accountable for monitoring its success. You define exactly what artifact constitutes evidence and where that artifact is stored.
No shared ownership.
A control with shared ownership is a control that will inevitably fail.
Wow. Okay, so the second tactical shift is embedding compliance into the daily workflow. This attacks the archaeological dig head-on.
It stops it at the source.
Yeah. If compliance is treated as a seasonal event, something we only discuss in October before the auditors actually arrive, it will perpetually operate as a crisis.
It has to become a habit.
Right. It must be integrated into the standard operational rhythm of the business. Okay, I get the theory, but for the listener driving to work right now, what does embedding a control actually look like in practice?
Let's look at the three most problematic friction points our sources highlighted. Organizations consistently fail here, but there are mechanistic fixes for each.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first is unscheduled access reviews.
Oh, everyone's favorite.
Right. The control requires the organization to periodically verify that all users have the appropriate level of access to critical systems.
Makes sense.
Sure. In an unstructured environment, teams know they are supposed to do this, but without a forcing function, it gets deferred in favor of urgent product shipping.
Because reviewing access logs isn't going to increase revenue.
Exactly. So what is the mechanism to fix it? You apply the DRAM's principle of recurring loops.
Okay.
You do not rely on an administrator just remembering to initiate the review. You programmatically schedule the review into the organizational calendar, typically quarterly.
Hard-coded into the calendar.
Yes. You assign unambiguous ownership to the compliance manager to initiate the process. And here's the kicker. You tie the completion of the review to the performance metrics of the engineering managers.
Oh, wow. So they have skin in the game.
Exactly. You transform a vague intention into a scheduled, unavoidable mechanical operation.
That is brilliant. Okay, friction point number 2. Outdated vendor inventory.
The black hole of vendor risk management.
Yes. In modern organizations, teams swipe corporate cards to buy new SaaS tools faster than IT can possibly track them.
It's shadow IT run amok.
Totally. Marketing buys a new analytics platform, engineering spins up a new monitoring tool, and suddenly customer data is flowing into unvetted, unmonitored third-party environments.
And the standard failure mode here is attempting to solve this with a really heavy, complex procurement process.
Which just slows the business down.
Right. And it causes employees to actively subvert it. The tactical fix is to first establish a single source of truth.
What does that look like?
The sources note that even a simple centralized spreadsheet is a perfectly acceptable starting point, provided it has an unambiguous owner.
Wait, I have to challenge this. We just spent 20 minutes dissecting why relying on human memory and manual processes is the root cause of audit fatigue.
Fair point.
If we are using a manual spreadsheet to track our vendors, aren't we right back to where we started? How does a spreadsheet fit into a philosophy of automated, continuous observability?
It is a valid challenge, but we have to look at the mechanics of organizational maturity. A spreadsheet is not the end state. It is the scaffolding required to build the automated state.
Okay, keep going.
You cannot automate the discovery of shadow IT if you don't even have a baseline taxonomy of what constitutes a vendor. The spreadsheet establishes the data schema.
Like the columns.
Exactly. Tool name, business owner, data classification, meaning does this tool actually process sensitive customer data, and risk rating.
Got it.
Once that schema exists and is enforced by a human owner, you have a structured data set. Now, you can build the automation.
Oh, I see.
You can write a script that queries your single sign-on provider, like Okta, cross-references active applications against the spreadsheet, and automatically flags any unsanctioned tool that isn't in the inventory.
So the spreadsheet was just step one.
Yes. The manual spreadsheet is the necessary bridge to the automated event stream.
That makes perfect sense. You have to map the territory before you can actually pave the road.
Exactly.
Okay, friction point number 3 is reactive incident response. Most teams have an incident response policy document sitting somewhere in a Google Drive.
Gathering dust again.
Yeah, but they just assume that when a real crisis hits, their brilliant engineers will somehow figure it out on the fly.
Which is terrifying.
It is.
Yeah.
Because hope is not an operational strategy.
And the auditor knows that a pristine policy document is completely useless if the team has never actually executed it under pressure.
So what's the fix?
The mechanical fix here is to generate evidence of capability before an actual disaster occurs. You do this by running a tabletop exercise.
The tabletop exercise is such a fascinating concept because it bridges the gap between technical infrastructure and human psychology. Let's really dive into this.
Sure.
Walk us through exactly how an organization executes a valuable tabletop simulation.
The mechanism of a successful tabletop exercise requires high fidelity to reality. You gather the critical stakeholders in a room, the lead engineer, the head of infrastructure, legal counsel, and corporate communications.
The core crisis team.
Right. And you introduce a highly specific, severe scenario. Let's simulate a compromised AWS administrator key.
Okay, high stakes.
You start the clock. Minute 1. Guard duty alerts the security team to anomalous API calls originating from an unfamiliar IP address, and they are attempting to access an S3 bucket containing customer backups.
Oh, wow. The tension in the room changes immediately.
Mm-hmm.
What does the team do next?
You force them to walk through the actual mechanical steps of the response playbook. Who receives the alert?
Is it an email? A text?
Right. Is it a PagerDuty notification, or does it just dump into a noisy Slack channel that everyone ignores?
Probably the latter.
Often, yes. How do they verify the alert isn't a false positive? Once verified, who actually has the unilateral authority to revoke that AWS key and isolate the compromised environment?
Can the on-call engineer just do it?
Or do they need the CTO's explicit approval? If the CTO is on a cross-country flight, what is the escalation path?
And while the technical team is trying to stop the bleeding, you force the business side to react too.
Absolutely. At minute 60, a major customer emails support asking why their application is throwing errors. Does the support team know what to say?
Or are they totally in the dark?
Right. At what point does legal determine that this constitutes a material breach requiring notification to regulatory bodies?
This sounds incredibly stressful, but
Yeah.
so necessary.
Precisely. You run the scenario to its logical conclusion, documenting every single gap, every miscommunication, and every technical blind spot.
And what's the value of that for the audit?
Well, the value is twofold. First, you dramatically improve the actual operational resilience of your organization. You fix the blind spots.
Right.
But from a compliance perspective, the detailed summary of that exercise, the scenario, the attendees, the identified gaps, and the remediation plan becomes an incredibly powerful artifact.
Evidence.
Yes. It provides the auditor with undeniable contextual evidence that the incident response control is not just a theoretical document, but a tested functional mechanism.
That is continuous evidence in action. You aren't waiting for a disaster to prove you can handle one. You are proactively generating the proof.
It flips the script entirely.
It really does. But overhauling an entire compliance program like automating access reviews, building vendor APIs, running tabletop simulations. That is a massive undertaking.
It's intimidating.
Yeah, a team cannot execute that across 50 different controls simultaneously while still trying to ship a product. Our sources recognize this reality and propose a highly specific surgical strike to begin the transition.
Right, the 48-hour execution challenge.
Let's talk about that.
The operational mandate here is do not boil the ocean. Do not attempt to buy a GRC platform and integrate every single system in your company on day one.
That's a recipe for burnout.
Exactly. Instead, you isolate the single control that generates the most visceral dread, the highest amount of manual labor, and the greatest friction across your organization.
In almost every single technology company on Earth, that control is the user access review.
Without a doubt.
It is the universally loads process where IT, HR, and engineering managers have to look at massive, unstructured lists of employees and somehow verify exactly what systems they have access to.
It is tedious, it is prone to massive human error.
And it inevitably leads to the discovery of orphaned accounts.
Always. So the 48-hour challenge dictates that you spend 2 days completely re-architecting the mechanics of this single workflow. You do not touch any other compliance requirement.
Just focus entirely on access.
Right. You start by defining the absolute, unassailable source of truth for active personnel. In a modern organization, this is usually the HR information system, like Workday or Gusto.
Okay.
If an individual is not marked as active in that system, they functionally do not exist within the organization.
The next step is the mechanical data mapping. You have to connect that HR source of truth to your identity provider, say, Okta or Microsoft Entra.
And this is where it gets messy.
Very messy. This is where the friction of unstructured data hits you right in the face. You realize the developer is listed as Jonathan in Workday, but their Okta profile was somehow created as John.
And their legacy AWS IAM role is just their initials.
Exactly.
And that friction is exactly why this challenge is so valuable. You are forcing the underlying architecture to actually align. You resolve the mapping discrepancy.
To clean the data.
Yes. Then you establish the automated trigger. When HR changes an employee's status to terminated in Workday, a programmatic loop instantly disables their Okta account.
Which subsequently severs their access to every connected downstream application.
And automatically.
Finally, you configure the system to write a time-stamped log of that revocation event to a secure, immutable storage location.
You have taken a chaotic, manual archaeological dig that used to require 3 different managers sending frantic Slack messages.
And you have replaced it with a silent, programmatic state machine.
It's a thing of beauty.
But why focus this intense effort on just one control? Why is this surgical strike so effective at changing the culture of the organization?
The deeper mechanism there is that fixing one control perfectly acts as a diagnostic stress test for your entire operational architecture.
Oh, I see.
When you attempt to automate user access, you will hit walls. You will expose the structural weaknesses that were previously hidden by human heroics.
Like what?
You will discover that your role hygiene is catastrophic. That instead of creating specific permission groups for read-only database access, IT just gave 50 developers super admin rights because it was faster.
Yikes.
Or you will discover that contractors bypass the HR system entirely and are provisioned directly in the cloud environment, making them totally invisible to the automation.
Exposing those flaws is definitely painful, but it forces the organization to confront reality.
Exactly.
And once the engineering team experiences the profound relief of having that one deeply painful control run silently in the background, generating its own evidence without asking them for a single screenshot, the culture shifts.
It's a revelation for them.
They stop viewing compliance as an adversarial tax imposed by management. They start viewing it as an interesting systems design challenge. They actually see the value of the Dieter Rams event stream.
And this raises an important question. Perhaps the most critical question for any technology leader listening today.
Lay it on us.
If your underlying infrastructure, your cloud providers, your version control systems, your identity management platforms, if they already possess the exact cryptographic knowledge of what happened, when it happened, and who did it,
Right.
why are you paying your most talented engineers to act as a manual transcription service between those systems and an auditor's spreadsheet?
Wow. That question really encapsulates the entire journey we've taken on this deep dive. We started in the messy, frustrated reality of the Reddit trenches, examining the hidden engineering tax and the morale-destroying nature of the archaeological dig.
We saw how bad it can get.
Yeah. And then we looked at the philosophical alternative, applying the industrial design principles of Dieter Rams to reimagine a chaotic knot of manual labor as a clean, automated event stream.
Less, but better.
Always. We explored the market reality driving this shift, how enterprise procurement teams are demanding the continuous observability of a Type 2 report, and how a qualified opinion can literally kill a company-making deal.
The stakes couldn't be higher.
We demystified the trust services criteria, moving past the rigid view of compliance to understand that you have the power and the responsibility to map your controls directly to the physical reality of your engineering workflows.
Instrument reality.
Exactly. And finally, we looked at the mechanical execution, utilizing the RCI matrix to eliminate ambiguous ownership, building single sources of truth, running high-fidelity tabletop simulations, and executing the surgical strike of the 48-hour access review challenge.
The transition from manual compliance to automated observability is ultimately a transition from chaos to order.
That's a great way to put it.
It is about building an organization that is secure by design, where trust is proven continuously, silently, and irrefutably as a natural byproduct of operational excellence.
As we wrap up our deep dive into these sources today, I want to leave you with a conceptual lens to apply to your own organization tomorrow morning. We've talked extensively about the mechanics of systems, data mapping, and event logs.
We got pretty technical.
We did. But consider the historical alternative. If your company's ability to prove its security relies entirely on an engineer frantically searching their memory for a Slack conversation from 8 months ago, you do not actually possess a compliance program.
What do you have then?
What you have is an oral history tradition.
Oh, wow.
You have a tribe sitting around a campfire, relying on storytelling and mythology, instead of an engineered system generating immutable logs. So look closely at your operations and ask yourself, how much of your organization's multi-million-dollar customer trust is currently resting entirely on the hope that someone simply remembered to take a screenshot? Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you approach your systems this week with the ruthless, clarifying eye of an industrial designer.